Yeah, so we've begun a new theme last week. Vidanya introduced us with a new theme, Stories of the Path. And what we're going to be doing is continue to tell stories, some of them Buddhist stories, some of them fairy tales, true stories that happened, but we're going to use those stories to illustrate the Buddhist path, but a particular version of the Buddhist path. And this is the five stages of the Buddhist path, or we also sometimes refer to it as a system of practice or the system of the Dharma life. And there are five stages or five aspects to this. So we're going to have probably about five talks for each of these stages, exploring them. And the stages are, to begin with, integration. We're looking at integration for the next few weeks and started last week. And I'll say a bit more about integration in a little while, but integration is the start of the path. It involves becoming aware of different aspects of ourselves and drawing them together to become a whole harmonious person, a whole self. And another way of describing this, Vidanya said last week, is you could talk about becoming an individual when you're integrated. But then that's just the first part of the Buddhist path. The next part we describe as positive emotion. And this is the self that we've gathered, the individual that we've become, starting to redirect our energies, our volitions, our choices, our decisions in a more skillful direction, and retraining our heart and mind in positive emotions, metta, particularly metta, but joy, faith, gratitude, reverence. And we could describe this stage as becoming a connected individual, the stage of positive emotion. But all the while, we're still at this stage dominated by a very strong sense of self, still separated from the rest of the world. And as we engage with the Buddhist path, all the time, kind of we have the next stage is spiritual death and spiritual rebirth, which kind of we're describing as coming together. You can't have one without the other. And it's as though old versions of ourself die and new versions of ourself arise. But there comes a point where, the old version of ourself dies in a very strong way, a particular way. And this is when insight arises on the Buddhist path, and a completely different experience of ourself and our consciousness can emerge, spiritual rebirth. We're going to explore these stages through stories as the weeks go by. And there's a fifth aspect of the spiritual path as well, which is called receptivity. And this is more mysterious, but we can have the sense that it's us making things happen. We're doing lots of work, transforming ourselves. But actually, there's a big part of the spiritual life involves creating the conditions for something out of our control to arise, and we have to be receptive to that. We have to cultivate receptivity to it seems something outside of our current experience. We have to create the conditions and allow that to manifest. So we need receptivity. So these are the five aspects we're going to be looking at: integration, positive emotion, spiritual death, spiritual rebirth, and spiritual receptivity. But for the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at this first aspect, integration. So as I said earlier, we begin the spiritual life, and this was certainly true of myself and still true of myself to a large extent. We begin not just as an individual, not as a self like we think we are. We start to discover that we've got lots of different volitions, drives. Often a lot of them are below the kind of level of our conscious awareness. We're not really fully aware of these different drives. And it's as though we're a kind of bundle of different selves who all want different things, and we're conflicted. We find ourselves conflicted, not really fully able to commit, to be reliable, to be consistent, have integrity in different situations. And we can find ourselves, maybe making a resolution in the new year and really, really meaning it, really wanting to change, really wanting to make, to cultivate a positive new habit. But then a few weeks later, we wonder why we made that commitment. We no longer want to do that anymore. And it seems like it was that, that decision was made by a different person, a different self. So if we're not integrated, it's very hard to make commitments and promises and really keep them, to be reliable, to be able to, for other people to rely upon us. Whereas through awareness, when we begin to meditate, cultivate awareness, we can start to become aware of all the different drives within us, how we are in different circumstances, and become more consistent. We can gather the different aspects of ourselves together and be able to make commitments and see them through. I'm no longer a kind of divided person, but a harmonious whole person with all of our energies behind a kind of higher purpose. So, yeah, and there's images, but Daniel talks about some images that might be helpful to think about these kind of maybe subterranean, like subconscious aspects of ourselves. It's almost like you could think of, or particularly we have animal drives, like, yeah, and you can think sometimes we've got a kind of lower nature or a kind of, Vidani described it as a doggy consciousness. And there's an image of the kind of a more noble awareness, a kind of more human consciousness integrated with those animal depths. So the centaur, Vidani described the image of a centaur, kind of powerful image of a kind of the human nobility of the human with the power of those animal drives, kind of unified, harmonized. But it's not all kind of dark animal stuff below the surface. There's a lot of jewels, there's a lot of treasure there, there's a lot of beauty, there's a lot that we kind of don't know about ourselves, a lot of potentials that we're just unaware of. So to begin with, we need to become aware and gather together the different aspects of ourselves. And but Daniel said last week, we do that mainly through awareness, through kindly awareness, combination of metta and awareness, but also having a central kind of unifying principle that we live by, almost like having a king in our kingdom. It's like our, without a unifying kind of, a unifying principle or a kind of a king in the kingdom, it's run amok. The different tribes within us will kind of be at war with each other. We need a kind of a wise king at the centre, that Daniel said last week. This brings me on to my story this evening. My story this evening is going to be a tale of King Arthur, a wise king, and his knights of the Round Table. So I think in itself this is a really good image for integration. And maybe I've got Vicky on text, she might share with me a couple of the images of the knights of the Round Table that we have, and particularly there's one looking at it from the top as well, which is particularly good. It reminds me of a Buddhist mandala. We have the Buddhist mandala is a circle, and in the centre of the circle is the principle we live by, which is the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And if you could share the other image as well, Vicky, of the knights in the Round Table, the kind of two-dimensional one. It reminds me of a mandala. And the stories of King Arthur as well. The knights turn up and they're kind of almost like enemy knights. They often end up through misadventures dressed in the armour of an enemy knight, and they end up battling one of the knights of the Round Table. And then in the end, they win a place at the table. And you could see the different stories of the knights becoming part of the Round Table as symbolising us. What we want is all the different aspects of ourselves kind of seated around that table and on board, serving a higher purpose, serving, in this case it's King Arthur, but in our case it'll be serving whatever it is we truly want to do with our lives, whatever we want to put our energies behind. We need to gather our energies together, have them unified and serving the same cause. So we need a kind of a wise king at the centre of our mandala. We need to create a round table, gather our different energies. We need a kind of unifying principle. Okay, so I'll come back to that and I'll tell the story. The story involves Sir Gawain. And Gawain is famous for a story involving Gawain and the Green Knight, which is a very kind of magical story, rich in symbolism. And there's an image, I think, of Gawain and the Green Knight. Here he is. Well, here's Gawain. He's very noble, gallant, handsome knight. He's said to be one of the most kind of courteous and kind of noble of knights. He's said to be a defender of the poor, a defender of women, and a really kindly knight. So he's a really kind of well-loved knight, and also the nephew of King Arthur. So this story involves Sir Gawain. There's an image of the Green Knight, but this is an image of Gawain. So this story starts at Christmas. King Arthur is feasting in Northumberland, in Carlisle, and he's been battling the Saxons in Scotland. and driving them out of Scotland. And he's now returning back to the kingdom, but he's stopping to celebrate Christmas and a feast in Carlisle, we're told. And then a damsel in distress, a lady, enters the court and is in distress, is weeping, and tells a story that a fearsome knight, a huge knight, has taken her husband captive. And it also has called out King Arthur as a coward, said King Arthur is the only man who would battle me, but he's too cowardly, he won't come to battle me. And King Arthur, he takes the bait, he rises up from his table and says, this is a quest for me, this is a quest I'm going to take myself. And Gawain and some of the other knights try and talk Arthur out of it, say, no, don't you go on this quest, we'll go on it. But Arthur's adamant it's going to be him who goes on this quest himself. So he gets his horse saddled up, he gets his sword, Excalibur, and his armour, and he rides out, he follows this lady out into the forest, Inglewood Forest, which is said to be a kind of magical, mysterious forest, kind of, it's said to kind of border other lands, which is symbolic in itself. But they come out of the forest, and they actually, while we're in the forest, I could show you my forest background. Let's see if this works. So they're in the forest and they're riding through the forest. It doesn't work brilliantly because I've become a bit see-through, but if you can imagine, we're in a forest. And towards the end of the forest, they come out and they see on the moors, they see a dark cliff, black rocks, sheer cliff, and there's a dark lake, and in the middle of it, an island and a huge castle. And this drawbridge kind of crashes open, and out rides this huge, fearsome knight. Is absolutely massive, huge knight, fearsome knight. Actually, I'll go back to the regular background because it's a bit freaky. And the knight, calls out Arthur and again describes him as cowardly. He doesn't dare face this knight. This knight says, he calls out King Arthur, and King Arthur, full of anger, just charges towards this knight, gets his sword out, charges across the drawbridge. But suddenly something strange happens. This horse just stops still, and Arthur is just overcome by the most powerful fear, and he doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand where this fear has come from. He's just gripped by fear and he can't move, and he's under a spell and enchantment. And the large knight laughs at him and says, I could slay you now, Arthur, but I have pity on you. And instead, I'm going to send you away. With a riddle. And if you can come back in a year to this day and give me the answer to this riddle, I'll spare your life. But if you can't, I'll slay you and cast your body into this lake. So he sets Arthur a riddle, and Arthur rides back full of dread and kind of a sense of what's happened, what have I done. Goes back through the forest and meets Gawain. Gawain's come to find him, meets Gawain in the forest, and he tells Gawain what's happened. Tells him that he needs to go and find the answer to this riddle that has been set. So Arthur sets about, and Gawain and all the other knights, they set about trying to find the answer to this riddle, and they get kind of pages and pages of different possible answers from wise people that go around. They gather as much information, as many answers as they can. And a year later, they set back out in the forest. They go back here. We go back in the forest. Here we are. They're back in the forest, looking for this castle, looking for this lake. They come to the edge of a clearing in the forest, and they're dazzled by a beautiful white horse. This amazing jewelled white horse kind of steps out of the forest, and they're dazzled by this. But when they get closer, they're frightened and they're kind of taken aback, because riding on the horse is what's described as a loathsome lady. She's described as the ugliest lady anybody's ever set eyes upon. She's got red skin, yellow teeth. Here's an image that I found of the lady, and but they said that the most fearsome thing about her was the look of sadness. She had a look of pain and sorrow and sadness behind these red eyes that she had. And she says to King Arthur, she says, I know where you're headed, I know what your errand is, and you haven't got the right answer, you're going to fail and you're going to be killed. And but she said, I know what the answer is. I know what the answer is to this riddle, and I can tell you on one condition. You have to promise one thing. And Arthur says, well, what is it? What is this one condition? And she says, I have to be. You have to promise one of your knights, one of your noblest knights from the noblest of families, has to marry me, has to agree to marry me, and then I will tell you the answer that you need to this riddle. So Arthur said, I can't promise that. I can't do that. And the lady kind of cackles and says, well, you're certain to die. But then Gawain steps up and says, wait, I will marry you. And Arthur says, you can't do that. I can't ask you to do that. And Gawain says, no, I'm happy to do that to save your life, my uncle. I'm happy to do this. So the loathsome lady, leans over to Arthur and whispers in his ear the answer to the riddle. And Arthur sets out through the clearing, through the forest, back to the castle, the Black Castle. And the knight is there, and he says, "Oh, you're brave, Arthur, for returning a year later. But do you have the answer to my riddle?" And Arthur gets out his books and the pages and pages, and he reads out the various answers that he's found. And the knight laughs and says, "You haven't found the right answer. None of these are the right answer." But Arthur says, "Well, wait, I met a lady in the forest, and she told me the answer to the riddle." And he says, "Oh, that's Lady Ragnar. Curse her, Lady Ragnar." And Arthur tells the knight the answer that Lady Ragnar gave him, and the spell is lifted. And it said the knight turns away with a sound of pain, and kind of his horse rides back into the castle, and the drawbridge closes. So Arthur is freed. He's freed of this curse of death, but now Gawain has landed with a curse of his own. He has to marry this loathsome lady, as she's described. And Arthur says, "Well, I've escaped death, but for you, it's like you've been, you have a death sentence of your own, Gawain." And they ride back to the Carlisle Castle, and everyone's delighted to see them. And Arthur says, "Get out a wedding feast. There's going to be a wedding," and everybody's delighted. There's partying in the streets, people are celebrating. But when they see Gawain and Lady Ragnar on the horse, everything goes quiet and still, and people are shocked and kind of feel for Gawain, it said. And then at the party feast, Gawain is very noble, and they get married. But then at the feast, it's like Lady Ragnar behaves like an ogre, kind of devouring the food and slobbering everywhere. So there's the sense of sadness at the feast for Gawain and what he's committed himself to. But then they go to the marriage suite. They go to their bedroom as man and wife, and Lady Ragnar says to Gawain, "Please will you kiss me as a husband ought to?" And Gawain is the noblest of knights, and says, "Of course I will." So he closes his eyes and kind of reaches up to kiss Lady Ragnar, but then is instantly kind of repelled and backs away. And a sweet voice calls out to him, "Gawain, Gawain." And he turns around, and there's the most beautiful lady he's ever seen, he's ever set eyes upon, standing there in the room. He says, "Well, who are you, and where's my wife? Where's the Lady Ragnar?" And she says, "Well, I am the Lady Ragnar, and through your kindness and compassion towards me and unselfishness, you've lifted the spell. You've lifted the spell that I was under." And Gawain is amazed and delighted, but Lady Ragnar says, "It's only been lifted for 12 hours, for half of the day. And you must decide whether I'll be by day a hag, or by night a loathsome lady. And if it's by day, then you'll get the scorn and humiliation, the embarrassment of your friends seeing you with a lady like this. But then if it's by night, after when you come back weary from the battles, you'll have to then come home to me in this state. But it's up to you. You must choose, Gawain." And Gawain says to Lady Ragnar, "I can't make that choice. You must make that choice for yourself, because you need to decide if you're gonna, what's going to be worse for you, to have me come home and be repelled by you, or to have this scorn and people laughing at you in the court. You must decide for yourself. And Lady Ragnar weeps and says, Gawain, through your unselfishness and your kindness, I'm now completely liberated from this spell, and all of the time I will have my true form, my kind of beautiful true form. And also the knight of the castle is my brother, and he's now freed from the spell that he was under. He'd been placed under a spell by the evil Lady Morgana, and he's now liberated from this spell. So that is the story of Gawain and Lady Ragnar. And what does it have to do with integration? Well, possibly nothing, but I think for me there's a lot of symbolism we can draw out of it, which tells us about the process of integration. If we see the story as symbolising something, representing something, we could see certain symbolism which tells us about the process of integration. So, firstly, the first detail I've talked about Knights of the Round Table, so I won't go back to that. But firstly, taking up a quest. When you commit to something, when you take up the adventure of the Dharma life or anything, when you take up a quest and you commit to something, it takes you into dark places. It takes you into those woods, those forests, just on the edges of kind of our known experience of ourselves. We start to come up against and encounter the bits of ourselves that are, on the edges of our psyche, on the edges of our consciousness. And these are the bits that we need to integrate. So it's when you really commit to something, that's when you meet these different aspects of yourself. And initially, some of them, well, in a way like this Dark Knight who has this power over Arthur, initially, when we're not fully aware of these different aspects, they rule us from the shadows, they rule us from the edges, they have power over us. And that's how we begin the Dharma life, like that. We're kind of ruled from the edges of our psyche. Our unconscious aspects have power over us until we integrate them. Okay, so that's the first aspect. But then also, if we're going to complete our quest of enlightenment, of awakening, becoming wiser, becoming kinder, we're going to need the help of these aspects that kind of dwell in the forest, that dwell on the edges of the psyche. So we need, and initially, some of them are going to appear fearful and loathsome and ugly to us. We don't want anything to do with them, but we need them. We need the help. So I think so. There's different ways of looking at this, and one of them is psychological, which I'll come on to in a little minute. The kind of the integration of different aspects, but also, if you really commit to something, and if you want to have the integrity of being somebody who's reliable, and you made a commitment, sooner or later it's going to get ugly. Sooner or later it's going to get unpleasant. It's going to get difficult. There's going to be challenges, and then you either kind of give up on what you've committed to, or you have to go along with the things that you find difficult, that you have aversion to, the challenges. So you can also see it in this way. You have to have integrity to become integrated, to become a reliable person. You have to be able to marry the hag in a way, marry the kind of that which you're averse to. You have to really be able to commit to it. And you don't know what the situation is going to bring. You don't know what kind of challenges you're going to meet. There's going to be difficulty. There's going to be things we find aversion. Like if you're going to be part of a sangha, you're going to find people that you're averse to, people that you don't really want to be with, but you're both committed to being in a sangha together, and that's going to happen in different circumstances, different times. But it also might be you encounter parts of yourself that you find you have aversion to as well, and we need to become married to those parts of ourselves. We need to that marriage is a symbol of kind of commitment, but also unity, isn't it? It's kind of coming together, different people. So we need to marry those parts of us. We need to become unified and in harmony. And those bits of us seem sometimes abhorrent to us. They seem ugly. We don't want anything to do with these different parts of ourselves. But how do we, in the story, there's transformation. These bits of us, Initially, Lady Ragnall appears in this loathsome form, but is transformed. And what transforms Lady Ragnall is Gawain's kindness. Gawain, kind of in a way, well, the kissing Lady Ragnall, kissing that which is loathsome or ugly. It's bringing compassion and kindness towards that which we fear about ourselves, the bits that we're in denial about, the bits that we don't want to be there. Actually, if we're going to become integrated and whole, we need to bring kindness, and that will transform them. It won't transform them necessarily overnight. We have to kind of do this over a long period of time, but those bits of us will become transformed, and the beauty will be revealed. Yeah. So one thing I wanted to talk about was the dilemma that Gawain is faced with. Does he does he have a kind of beautiful wife in the evenings when he's alone and at home, but then have the kind of ugliness, embarrassment, humiliation? Does he have um, a beautiful wife for everybody to see, and that kind of pride and pleasure that he might have with that, and then the kind of discomfort and aversion of this ugly form at home in the evening? And I think to me, this speaks of ethics and integration. Because to begin with, we begin when we're unaware and we're not integrated. We can be in sometimes denial about, or we're unaware, maybe in denial about aspects of ourselves, behaviours that are unskillful, that we don't realise. We don't realise we're doing things that are unskillful, and sometimes it's obvious to other people. So this is for me like we think we've got a kind of beautiful outward appearance and we're kind of very skillful, we're kind of but actually everyone can see our ugliness. It's there for everybody to see. They can see our friends, people know us, kind of know there's blind spots. We don't realise we have these unskillful habits. But when we start to become aware and we realise sometimes the ugliness of our behaviour, there can be maybe there can be an impulse to want to hide that and people not to see that about us, not to want to reveal that to other people. I think what is really liberating in those situations is when we can come clean in our confession, when we have people that we trust, that we can just reveal ourselves to, warts and all. We can just kind of tell them about ourselves, tell them what we've done, acknowledge it. And it's not a confession in Buddhism, in the Dharma life. It's not about beating ourselves up. It's not really about punishment. But what it is, it's about acknowledging and really seeing and beginning to let go of behaviours. Like when we really externalise it and share it and name it to other people, when we allow other people to see the ugliness of our own behaviour, and we're not afraid of that, we're not afraid for them to see that about us, that's when it really begins to be liberated. That's when it really begins to be transformed. So yeah, we need to bring that kind of the ugliness of our unskillful behaviour into the light of day and share it. Well, firstly with ourselves, we need to admit it to ourselves and begin to see it, turn towards it with kindness. But also we need to allow other people to see it inappropriately. Like we don't just go around blabbing our mouths about how the things that we've done inappropriately. But in certain proper situations where we've got friends that we trust and we can confide in, we start to let them see us. We let ourselves be seen. And just admit to people, let them see us, warts and all, and then it's liberated. Then those parts of us start to become liberated and can transform and can start to be expressed, and we can start to cultivate and have that energy expressed in more beautiful forms. Yeah. So that's this tale of Gawain and Lady Ragnall. So yeah, if we want to gather the bits of ourselves who seem to be in conflict with each other, and we want to be more successful in our Dharma life, if we want to have all the different aspects serving the Dharma, like King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Well, when we commit and we go on that quest, we're going to go into the darker woods. We're going to meet bits of ourselves that maybe we don't like. Maybe it seems like they have a spell over us as well. But if we can commit to difficult circumstances, commit to different getting into relationship with difficult parts of ourselves, and we can turn towards them with kindness, even kind of cozy up alongside them, and just be really, really kind to them in meditation, even. And then just allow people to reveal kind of sometimes the ugliness of our unskillful habits. Well, then it can be transformed, and then our energies can be, can become beautiful. We can have, our beauty can be revealed. So that's the story of Gawain and Lady Ragnall.